Good afternoon. Nice turnout we've got here. Thank you everyone for coming. We're coming here to celebrate the life of our dear friend Giorgio. And just a brief bit about my history with him. I met Giorgio on his 75th birthday. And one quick thing about him, earlier this year I went to a book signing. And a friend of mine asked where I'd been. I just got back from the hospital seeing Giorgio. And another friend said, Giorgio Gomelsky, who's that? And my friend rolled his eyes and said, oh, Giorgio, the man who invented British rhythm and blues. And I turned to him and said, well, maybe he didn't invent it, but he was definitely in the same house when it was giving its birth. But I got to know Giorgio through Gong because I went off to Amsterdam with him to film, and Gilly Smith and David Allen and Bean and Mike Howlett, they all said when I get back to New York, I've got to interview Giorgio. And then through Sharon Blythe and Laurie Eastside, we were going to his 75th birthday that night. And I went up to Giorgio and I said, can I talk to you about Gong? And he said, come back tomorrow and I'll tell you my life story. And then what went on from there was weekends and hours of sitting down interviewing him and trying to put some kind of sense to his life together, because Giorgio was someone who didn't really blow his own horn. And so I wanted to find other people to talk about him. And that's where we've got this film, which I want to start off with, and then we're going to have friends coming in, doing music and talking. So this is what we pulled together.
decided that this documentary is supposed to be of whatever my experiences in the music business. But I looked around and I said, what kind of and then I thought we have to put forward, we have to give a voice to the other approach to music, which came from loving it. Yeah. And our heroes and everything.
We all love that today.
Yeah. Well, most of them.
People that play it don't even like it.
Yeah.
But Giorgio always was mad. I mean, there was nothing stable about Giorgio.
Compelling, colourful, raconteur.
Everything seemed possible. No limits, only your own imagination.
He was, in every respect, even cooking, sort of flying walnuts.
Giorgio arrived in England about
year it was now, it must have been 58, 59 maybe. So
there were a lot of very dull, boring people around at that time. And there wasn't.
It's Swiss, it might have been French. He speaks so many languages, but it's,
"Oh, Jim, how are you? Come here, give me a hug, like this. Jim, good to see you. Let's have a drink."
He created the whole little place that the in-crowd wanted to be.
This is where the Stones made contact with the audience in such a way that both benefited.
The Crawdaddy was a specific club that Giorgio started and had his imprint on it, really. And it started really with the Stones, and the Yardbirds carried it on.
That was a time where they were learning how to contact an audience, how to communicate with an audience. And that's what it happened at the Crawdaddy and nowhere else.
It was crazy. People went completely mad. People hanging from the Irish J's on the ceiling.
With their feet and hands, and then shake. And they're shaking rhythm.
Giorgio managed the Yardbirds. He more or less invented the Yardbirds. And he managed them, and Harold Pendleton and my company and Giorgio's company were their agents.
You would get a call early in the morning, maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, and he'd say, come on baby, wake up, because we're on Ready Steady Go today, somebody can't do it, and they want us.
You normally have a manager calming down temperamental artists, whereas the band was calming down a temperamental manager.
They were good, and they were part of the band's success. And, without him, maybe it wouldn't have happened. You never know, do you?
He also worked with the Beatles. He knew Fellini. He worked with an amazing amount of and contributed a great deal.
And Epstein sent the Beatles to my house to develop material and talk to us as to how we were going to do this.
Giorgio was instrumental in writing the script for Hard Day's Night with Spike Milligan.
Columbia picture, 3-picture deal with the Beatles, etc., so and so to direct, and so. And Epstein took our script and gave it to Columbia.
And obviously Giorgio negotiated for them to get on the Beatles Christmas tour. And that was, of course, the big breakthrough, really.
Giorgio was telling about the film, etc., but I think that he wants to do good. And says, I would like to offer you a spot for the Yardbirds, they would be second top of the bill. We hadn't even made a record yet, And so we got to play on the Beatles Christmas show, and we did that for 2 years in a row.
And Clapton, a very big talent, was a little averse to being told what to do. So much so that Giorgio sacked him.
Eric didn't like that change that we made. I suppose he thought we were selling out in those days.
He even went out to to explain to me what happened with the Yardbirds, and he was trying to, he wanted them to be an experimental band, and they wanted to be international pop stars.
Eric came up to my office and I said, Eric, I said, it's very sad about this. Here's the rest of your wages. Can I keep my guitar? I said, no, it belongs to the group.
Giorgio never really saw monetary success as success. Giorgio, I think, looks at success as how much you influence people, how much you change the status quo, how much you advance the culture.
Somebody had told the police that they thought there were drugs at the speakeasy, and the police arrived, and I happened to be outside of the main room when the police arrived, and Giorgio said to them, shh. He said, do you have any idea who's here tonight? He said, jokingly, he said, let me inform you, this is the first appearance of the Animals since they're back from America. And he sweet-talked them into not going into the room and doing whatever they had to do.
The Yardbirds fan club was a good job for a 15-year-old. And she's singing a wing, and she's dead on. Dead on!
She was in our office answering Yardbirds fan mail for Gomelsky.
The pitch was perfect. You could sing, huh? I said, yeah. You want to be a singer? I said, yeah. You know, I said, okay, we work on it.
Pulling on his beard and imagining all these wonderful things that are going to happen to his artists.
It was quite a good family feeling at Marmalade Records, which was Giorgio's label.
They all get on with each other, put them together in a band. They called the Steve Becker, and you did modern gospel stuff and R&B.
And so we teed off with the Steve Becker to an immediate success.
They played a couple of gigs and it was huge.
Well, it operates like this. I go on and I play a couple of things. Julie comes on and she sings Tara Motown stuff. Rod will come on, we both sing back up for Rod. And then Baldry will come on, and Baldry was straight down the line, Chicago Blues, or I've Got My Mojo Working.
I think his quote about the Rolling Stones was that if he knew what kind of bourgeois nincompoops they would turn out to be, he never would have supported them in the first place.
In the studio theatres.
Some musicians have no imagination. And they're kind of like conservative, very conservative, very right-wing, very sort of like, this is the way Phil Collins is, this is the way they do it, Beatles do it, and the Beatles, they took every fucking chance they could. Because, not that they had to, but they could, so they did. The first gigs that Jimi Hendrix had were playing in the Tour de France with Johnny Hallyday, whose records I was producing.
Jim, we're making a record for Johnny Hallyday, and nobody must know. Johnny Hallyday, that's that huge French star. Yes, he's upstairs, don't tell anybody.
And I can remember Jimmy being in our offices at Paragon, but again, whatever Giorgio's involvement was, it was certainly musical, but not anything to do with business.
I spent £2 million doing this. I never had to ask for permission about money. Carte blanche, no problem.
Signing on the dotted line was not important. The music was important, the film was important, the story was important, but the business side of it just didn't happen.
We did the PR for every major thing that mattered, Rita Franklin, the organized tours. In my new studio next door, I had the whole Sects all rehearsing before they went out on tour. I had Molly there, Santa Fe, Otis Redding, that whole lot, It was fantastic. We were able to, for about 2 years, we were able to operate at maximum kind of situation.
If I was to cast a mad genius or eccentric, I'd cast Giorgio because he fills the bill perfectly.
It's a record with Paul McCarty. Paul McCarty wrote a piece for Chris Barber. When I Monday Brackets came and we went and we produced a single with his brother, I remember the title, it wasn't a hit, unfortunately. It was a film, it was fun, sort of like fun fair, fun.
Giorgio used to refer to it, oh, they're all about scratching books.
Any business to do with art, to me, is bad business.
I think they admired him, but they found him too eccentric. They wanted him to toe the line more.
A musician is really like a worker. He feels like on the path, on the way to discovering something, and he dies. He's never going to give up until he's got it. The attraction is too strong for you to give up.
The business just became so big. It doesn't have room for people like him now.
He's a great old, cranky old genius, and he's all right with me.
No, Anni only took the Stones after me. Was he really into music, or was it a fashion? Do you know what I'm saying? Because, and who were the real heroes around the scene in those days? Wasn't him. It was more like Peter Mead and Guy Stevens. No, both gone, unfortunately. But I knew them. I was there. I saw what was going on. And the thing behind the scene somehow interested me more than the mindless, my simple kind of where was I born, or kind of biographical track, But what one did is important. What one witnessed is important.
Fascinating character.
I'm going to MC the next little section of today. My name is Dave Solcher. I was a good friend of Giorgio's for about 33 years, and I see a lot of mutual friends, mostly from the New York area. So first, thanks for doing this historical video. Lets us know most of us have known Giorgio over the last 35 or 40 years during this New York period. And John's done a great job telling us about a lot of his adventures before he even got here. Some of them aren't even on there. I was in Milan many years ago, and I found out that apparently he started the Lausanne and Milan jazz festivals, and that's not even in his typical biographies. First, since almost everybody here was a good friend of Giorgio's, I think we would all have to agree that he would have never have woken up early enough to show up at this, right? I learned never to call Giorgio before 4 p.m., right? At 1 o'clock, David, why are you waking me up so early? Thanks are in order here. Giorgio had a very difficult last 4 years. We talk about the prime of someone's life. Giorgio's prime lasted for at least a good 50 years. And we heard about the early years, and until about 4 years ago, he really, truly was in his prime. First, the piano music, when you were all showing up, was by Ed Pastorini. Ed is a genius. He's a great pianist. You heard it. He's a little, where is Ed? I feel like Donald Trump. Where's Ed? Ed, come up here, man. There, Ed, and Ed is so shy. He's not going to never say a word. And Ed did a tremendous, Ed kept his, if you're all familiar with Giorgio's house, and who amongst us is not, Ed kept his little piano studio on the second floor for years and years after he no longer needed it, just to keep an eye on Giorgio. And over the last few years, I would often visit Giorgio, and Ed would be the guy that brought up the food, especially when he developed problems in walking up and down the stairs, and made sure that the garbage was taken out, and made sure that he'd see the doctor. And Ed, anyway, we owe a lot to Ed. I also want to mention Janice, who has been a real saint and keeping track of Giorgio both through a long period of health and the last few years, which have been difficult. Along with Janice, helping out John has been a great, John Sadler, who made the video, has been keeping an eye on Giorgio and helping him out, as has Raul. Raul is setting up everything here, and Raul ran the club and allowed Giorgio, I think, to make a living by renting out the studio on the first floor and keeping track of things. And Richard, who I believe is not here, but Richard, if you see this, we know you did everything you could to help Giorgio out, particularly in this last few years in and out of the hospital. So, as I was saying, in his prime, Giorgio was in his prime for many decades. And one thing I think we have to do as a group is we realize how we have to do something Giorgio never would have done if he were here, and that is to archive his material, put it in the library. There are several video people here who have made videos, as well as John's beautiful video. John Sadler, by the way, says he has about 40 hours of transcripts of Giorgio. The recordings, I have many recordings that Giorgio produced in the 80s that I'm sure are absolutely unavailable anywhere else. And it's up to us to try to find a place to keep this library and put it up on the web so people can hear the music and see the videos and the history. And I know very well Giorgio would never allow this if he were around. He always wanted everything done in a spectacular fashion. And as disorganized as he was, he was also a perfectionist. And he would have really wanted everything to be absolutely top quality. That's not the time for that anymore. Giorgio, speaking personally for a little bit, was a tremendous friend and guide for me for 33 years. One thing that's big impact on my life is the reason I'm married to Francesca over here is because of Giorgio. My band, the Spinozas, which he essentially produced, was playing a tonic. She showed up and became friends with him. They're both, Italians who love to smoke. He's kind of an Italian. And they became great friends, and he set me up with her, or her up with me, and kept telling, when he'd say, but David's kind of crazy, and she'd go, no, really, he's a great guy, you have to understand. So I owe him for that, and I owe him for many friends, Jonathan Craine and other people who have been friends throughout my adult life. We met, and I'm saying this because I think most of us who are friends had a similar story. When we met, I just found this fascinating man. I had no idea that he had this storied history. And John mentioned this. He didn't like to tell stories about himself. Apparently, he finally opened up just recently. Well, I met him. He was a DJ at Tramps. I wonder if anybody is here from Tramps. Terry? Terry's here? All right. Yeah. So Terry would. It's a pleasure to see you again after all these years. And the Tramps, I think, was sort of Giorgio's crawdaddy here in New York. Terry loved the blues. I mean, he's Irishman. He served a good Guinness, and Giorgio loved that. But Giorgio also produced a lot of and brought in the music. We'd bring in, Giorgio and Terry would bring in John Lee Hooker, and you'd have to pay him. Terry, I hope you come up and say a few words. Because he'd bring in John Lee Hooker, you'd have to pay John Lee per song. You'd have to pay John Lee Hooker per song. He had a little bottle of beer. Terry, it's a pleasure to see you. Terry Dunn, Grand Tramps.
Hey, Terry, you've got a wonderful place. I love this place. But we have to do more. You understand? There's so much more. We have to transport our ideas. We must do more things, okay?
Thank you, Giorgio. I love Giorgio, obviously, and find it difficult to find words to express my feelings. He was the sweetest man, one of the sweetest people I've ever known. And Tramps was Giorgio Gomelsky, and Giorgio Gomelsky was Tramps. there was always a void. When Giorgio wasn't there, it was complete. It was just like the atmosphere was perfect. And just thinking back to some of the great times would be like on Bastille Day, Giorgio would show up, not early in the morning, but like in the early afternoon, and we'd have a big pot ready, and he would make a big Giorgio gumbo for Bastille Day. So that was one of his favorites, and then of course share the food with everybody. The reason he didn't get up till 4 o'clock in the day most of the time was because none of us did back then, you know. We never went home. We never went home before 8 a.m., you know. So, but I really feel that like I would have loved to have been able to continue in Tramps for another 20 years. It was the best days and just the best people. It was an amazing time. Bob Gruens and all the great people that were around in those days. Michael O'Donoghue sends his love as well. Yeah, Michael O'Donoghue, who also loved Giorgio, and everybody that used to hang out. It was amazing. All I can say is like Giorgio was the Prix de Tramps. He was our champion. He was our great man, and I was very surprised when I heard about his death, and I'm sort of in shock a little bit still, you know, but what can I say except we're going to miss him so much, and thank you.
Terry, also John arranged for us to have beer after this at Pangea. I'm sure the beer is nowhere as good as the beer was at Tramps, where again he and Michael O'Donoghue would pour Mean Guinness. There were a lot of adventures at Tramps. I don't want to speak all day. I'll just say a couple very quickly. They're kind of poignant. We had Robert Palmer's wedding there, if you can remember. It was the first. Giorgio invited my string quartet. It was the first time we ever played, but we had Ornette Coleman and C. Del Davis and that saxophone player. Who was that? Who was the Big J McNeely? And then we were supposed to do a fundraiser for poor Robert Palmer, and it ended up being his memorial. And that was again our group, the Kropotkin's, with Jonathan and Patti Smith and Gary Lucas, who should be showing up later, unless he's here already. Ended up, we went there to Tramps to do a fundraiser for Robert, and it turned out to be his memorial. He died that day. Dozens of projects that I've been involved in with Giorgio over the years. I'll just mention a couple that because people are here in the audience. Giorgio's had, here, this is how I want to say this. As a musician, I've been lucky enough to work with some of the great record men in history. Of course, Giorgio was my favorite, but people like Teo Macero, who was did the Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk records, and Sam Phillips, who was perhaps the greatest of them all in some ways, or maybe runs along with Berry Gordy, Sam Phillips, and Elvis and Howlin' Wolf and everyone, Alan Lomax and Joe Boyd, and all of these people, all these great record producers, melded, in my opinion, two things. I mean, I know this from my personal experience, maybe many of you do here too. All of them had both a deep understanding and love of music, and they also had an idea of the broad role of music in society and the culture, and all of them were trying to change the world by forcing the world to appreciate the work of the unappreciated. I used to have these conversations with Giorgio, and we'd say, well, most of the great music from America comes from African Americans, from Jews, from hillbillies, from gay people, always people that are kind of unappreciated and the underdog, and Giorgio always said he was a champion of the underdog. I think rather than just talking about all that history right now, I just want to mention again a couple of them that I think were particularly special. 1989, Giorgio was a champion of the plastic people of the universe. We've been trying to get a statement from them to read today and haven't been successful in doing it, but I know that a couple of them are going to see this in Prague, and I hope that you write something about that. Anyway, in 1989, and this is important, in January of '89, he put a concert together at the Kitchen. Ed Pastorini was part of it. I actually have a little list of the people that were in there. Craig Harris, Sam Bennett, both Elliot Sharp and Gary Lucas, both of them are going to be performing today. Several Czech people, Vratislav Brabenek, who was actually kicked out of the Plastic People by the Stasi, had to go to Canada. He was the only plastic person who was actually kicked out. He came down here and we resurrected the Velvet, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Resurrected the Plastic People of the Universe material. We had a large band we put together. I conducted, Ed wrote the arrangements where we would do Plastic People music. This was at the Kitchen on West 24th Street. So the point of this being in January is the cassettes got back to Prague and helped people in the Plastic People and their friends like Václav Havel were aware that there was a movement in New York that was appreciating what they were doing and trying to get it out there. And so I think Giorgio played a small part in the protests that then followed, which ultimately, in November of the same year, became the Velvet Revolution. Incidentally, the Velvet Revolution, although they say it's for many different reasons, it's in fact because the Plastic People and also Havel were big fans of the Velvet Underground. And when they needed a first commissioner of the arts, they brought in Frank Zappa. So I know that, because I performed with the Plastic People years later, I know Gary did too, when we went to Prague, I know that this event was very important for them. Long list of different projects Giorgio did again. I think I'll just mention one more because Valerie is here, and Valerie helped put this together and has been a friend of Giorgio's through thick and thin for decades. And because of Giorgio's appreciation of the underdog, he was an early adapter of not just all kinds of African music, but specifically of hip hop. And in '83, he and Valerie and Laurie Eastside, if she's here, I don't know if Laurie's here, and Codamundi, who I don't know if he's here, from Kid Creole and the Coconuts, and Futura 2000, and Mr. Freeze. Futura's here? Okay. Put together, with me doing the music, and also Mark Mazer from Kid Creole and the Coconuts, if Mark is here, put together the first hip-hop musical. It was supposed to be Stefan Yelpe, you'll remember this, Sharon, from the False Prophets, so the downtown youth culture of, Stefan used to walk around with the dog head on his staff and wear spikes. And he was supposed to, in the play, meet the whole new hip-hop culture uptown. And it was actually a very beautiful piece. It was for the public theater, and I just say that Giorgio has a long history of appreciating these people. I want to end myself. There's a letter to read. There's a couple of letters to read from old Giorgio cronies. One of them I'm going to ask Winsome to read in a minute. This is from Liddell Macklin. Some of you must know Liddell, right? Liddell's a Chicago blues musician, lived in New York for many years, and Giorgio has been championing him for years. In June of about 2008 or so, 2006, he would always produce, every Sunday in the summer, he would produce a show with my Arabic flamenco group, the Spinozas, and Liddell, doing a double bill. And he's always been championing Liddell. Liddell is in Paris today, and he can't be here. But here's what I want to say. 2008, this is what I mean about the prime of Giorgio's life being so long. 2008, Giorgio, you remember, was a big promoter of Obama, right, the Obama election, and he had lots of Obama fundraising parties at his house. And the night of November, would it be 6, 2008, that's when Obama wins. Liddell is playing on a little bar in Houston Street. And he's absolutely ecstatic. And Liddell's African American, and Francesca and I, Liddell, leave that to walk up to the celebratory party on 24th Street. Everywhere we're walking, all the way from Houston Street up to 24th Street, especially Black Americans are screaming and yelling and running around, and everybody is ecstatic and can't believe that Obama was elected. And we show up at Giorgio's house, and you know what he says? He says, Muddy Waters won. Muddy Waters just became president. So that's how I want to remember Giorgio. I'd like to introduce Winston Brown, who's going to read the poem that Liddell Macklin wrote from Paris about Giorgio just today.
The man who found America's soul. For oh, where did it come from? Oh dear, where did it go? Somebody knows. Yes, it's in there, and only there. There will be no other but this. It is not what you can even think. It has no words, just silence and that old Negro spirit beating on the floor. We are not free from the last one. Hey, where is your name, boy? My name is of one and all. Who and where did it come from? From our many dreams and dreams, there is only one. Well, do we come back? Back to what? There is no other. It's gone. Just tell me your name. I am Giorgio, and we are now free, just in this moment of silence. Feel the love, know the soul, tells the man who found America's true soul. Love, yours truly, Liddell Macklin, February 27th, 2016.
Next we'll bring up Bob Gruen, Giorgio's old friend, to say a few words.
Hi, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, but like Keith Richard, I'm happy to be anywhere. It's nice to see such an eclectic crowd. You know, I expected that, knowing Giorgio. I remember at one of his birthday parties, he had the world's greatest saw player, the kind of saw you cut lumber with, and this guy played it with a violin bow, and it was beautiful. And Giorgio loved that kind of music. We went once, I first met Giorgio at Tramps, like many people here. He came down, it was our local neighborhood bar, even though I didn't live in the neighborhood. But it had great blues, and Giorgio loved the blues. And there was rumors that Giorgio had something to do with the Rolling Stones, but nobody really knew where he came from or what he did. It was always kind of mysterious at the beginning. And Tramps had great acts like Big Joe Turner and Lowell Fulsom. I remember one night when Lowell Fulsom was there, Mick Jagger showed up with Jimmy Rip to see the show. And he walked in and he saw Giorgio at the bar, and he immediately stopped and started talking to Giorgio, and we're all kind of elbowing each other like, holy shit, he really does know them. You know, it's true. And over the years, we found out little bits and pieces more about Giorgio's life. Actually, there's a picture, I think, over here of Giorgio and Mick talking. There was such a crowd around him, I couldn't even get close. I took a picture in the mirror. Looking through the pictures of Giorgio, he was always smiling, he was always happy, he was always encouraging people. I think that's the main thing I remember about Giorgio, was he was always encouraging people. No matter what you would tell him, he would tell you to take it further, do more with it. My wife makes beautiful cut paper artwork, and Giorgio really liked her artwork. And it kind of changes as the light changes, and Giorgio wanted her to hang it by wires so it would spin around and you could put more lights on it and you could see both sides at once. And he was always pushing people further and telling them to, create more. I remember he came to one of my birthday parties, and I'll never forget the vision of him as he left, because it was about half of this large birthday cake was left, and it was in a big box about 3 feet long. And Giorgio asked if he could take that back to the musicians who worked in his loft. And I said, sure, and I remember seeing him ride off on the cobblestones, balancing this 3-foot box on the basket of his bicycle. And he emailed me the next day and thanked me for it and said that it fed the creative minds and bodies of the young artists in his loft. And of course I said, let him eat cake, But as I got to know Giorgio more, when I first met him, I thought he was a European professor. That's why I didn't really believe he had much to do with rock and roll, because he looked like a professor and he spoke all different languages and he had this exotic accent and he seemed to know about literature and art and culture and politics, and he loved to talk. But as I got to know him, I found out that he learned the blues from the American GIs after the war. He was in Italy, and he said that there were these GIs who had albums, and a friend of his found a record player, and so they got together with the GIs, they could play these records, and that's when he first heard the blues, and he really, he loved it all his life. And he started the Crawdaddy to be able to hear the blues. He heard about the Rolling Stones were a blues band, and he thought it'd be great to have a place where they could play, and he got a room that was off the side of a pub, and he told me that when the Rolling Stones first came for their first show, only 3 people showed up. And he told Brian Jones, there's only 3 people here, what do you want to do? And Brian Jones said, well, that's 3 more than come to our rehearsals, so we'll play. So Giorgio went to those 3 people and he said, if you come back next week and you each bring 2 more people, I'll give you free drinks. So the next week there was about 10 people, and he did the same trick, and the next week he had about 30 people, and pretty soon the room was packed out and they had to move to a new space. In the course of about 3 or 4 weeks, they had to move across the street to a bigger room, and they really started to get a buzz going. At that point, I think Giorgio's father had passed away. He had to go back to Europe to take care of those things for about a month. And when he came back, Andrew Oldham had signed the Rolling Stones to a contract. Giorgio was kind of pissed about that. Although, as he said before, if he knew what kind of bourgeois nincompoops they were going to turn out to be, he never would have managed them in the first place. I think after that, he brought the Animals in, another blues band. And when they pretty quickly got too big for the room, he took his 17-year-old DJ. That's how he met Eric Clapton, because Eric had a collection of blues records, so he let Eric be the DJ. And he got Eric to form a band, and that was the Yardbirds, and Giorgio managed to sign them for a while and actually managed them for a few years. I have a CD box set called the Gomelsky Years, because he produced their early albums. And then he found the band that he really loved the most, I think was Magma. And he used to talk a lot about Magma, and he finally came and played here in New York one day. He traveled around France. He was talking about living in a van and traveling around Europe with Magma. And they finally came here and they played in the Knitting Factory, and Giorgio insisted that we had to come with him to see this fantastic band. And they played, I think, Gregorian chants backwards, and some of the songs were in a language that they had invented. And it was one of the most eclectic things I've ever seen, and that was Giorgio's favorite, which was typical of him. But he helped a lot of young people. In Ray Davies' book, X-Ray, Ray gives him credit for not only giving him his first job, but giving him the train fare to get to that job. And Giorgio started the coffee house movement, which is a big movement in England. You can see a movie called Espresso Bongo that takes place, that shows a lot of that. And it was typical of Giorgio how this came together, because Giorgio grew up in Italy and then he spent time in France. He had some good stories about Serge Gainsborough. And he went to England, and in England he was a young kid. He was working for a caterer. It was the only job he could get when he first got there. And he didn't really like England because they all drank tea, and he liked to have a good Italian or a French cup of espresso, a cup of coffee. And he managed to talk the catering manager into getting an espresso machine. He said, you can sell it to your clients as a interesting continental brew, just so he could get a cup of coffee. Well, they got the espresso machine, and the boss liked it because some of the other workers started drinking coffee instead of tea, and they started working a lot more. So he liked that. And the thing is, Giorgio, I think a few people have mentioned it, he really liked to talk. He liked to stay up at night and talk, and that's why he didn't get up until the afternoon, because he was talking until 8 or 10 in the morning. And he would talk about politics, he would talk about religion, he would talk about art, he would talk about literature. He just loved to talk. I remember he used to come to our Christmas parties. He would always bring several bottles of the new Beaujolais Nouveau, and then they would discuss the qualities of the new year of wine, you know. But he loved to talk, and in those days, in the 50s, the pubs in England still closed at 9 o'clock at night. And when the pubs closed, there was no place to go, there was nothing open, the town was completely dark, and there was no place to go and talk. And so Giorgio got an idea, and he talked to the catering manager, and he said, why don't we open a club that sells coffee? Because you're not allowed to sell alcohol after 9 o'clock, but nobody said you can't sell coffee. And that way people can come after the pub and they can talk. And he said the first night they opened, they didn't even know if the police would think they were doing something illegal because no other place in town was open. The town was completely dark. And he said the first night they were kind of looking up and down the street, but they didn't get closed because they weren't doing anything illegal. They were just drinking coffee and talking. And that became so popular, it turned into a whole movement. And in the 50s, there was this whole coffee house movement until they started finally opening the pubs till later. But anyway, I'm going to miss Giorgio a lot. You know, he was a philosopher with always had good advice. At one point in the 80s, I believe, J.V. Johansen made a movie called Thou and Love, featuring Marty Thau as a record company executive way before vinyl. And Giorgio was his psychiatrist in the movie. And he was it was almost typecast. Because Giorgio would keep asking him these questions and saying, well, what do you feel about this? And how do you think about that? And that's what Giorgio did on a daily basis. And I'm going to miss that very much. And I think that's why we're all here today, because we're all going to miss Giorgio. So thank you.
We should have some music now. I've got Elliot Sharp up, but I've never met Elliot Sharp. Is Elliot Sharp here? Good. Okay, well, in that case, can we have Martin up? And that will be followed by Jira and her flute.
So I'm part of the young, or I should say maybe younger contingent that benefited from pretty much, I guess, a platform that Giorgio created about 1978. And you know, when I think about it, you know, I owe a lot of people in my life, you know, for this and that, and a lot of, in the case of many people, I would say it's, you know, incremental, yes. You know, I'm a product of all the people that have somehow contributed in a way to my life. But really, when you look at Giorgio, for me, it's like really at the very, very beginning. I was 17 years old. I mean, so really, it's even arguable whether, who knows, I wasn't even committed to being involved in music at that point. So it's hard to know without things being pretty much facilitated. I mean, really, the whole scene that happened there at 78, 79 pretty much convinced me to just forget about going to college. So it was at that point. And the reason I decided not to go to college was like, wow, all this magnetism happening, and it's intense. I can't walk away from this. So even if it would have been like so kind of okay, you know, I probably would have just continued along the sort of status quo path of who knows what. But anyway, yeah, like 78, it all pretty much just started there. I mean, another person I owe, of course, is Bill Laswell, because I became part of that sort of collective of material and everything. And when I went to meet Bill, because some friends of mine, Michael Beinhorn and Fred Marr, other material members, we were all in high school. They said, we met this guy Bill, it's in this place, and it's really great. And he said, Bill would like to meet you, because Bill was always interested Bill had just arrived to New York, and he was interested in kind of meeting people. And so they said, Bill would like to meet you. And I said, okay, I'll go in this house. I'll go meet Bill. And the house turned out to be Giorgio's house in his building on 24th Street called Zoo House, Z-U. And so I go to meet Laswell, who was a big, essential mentor in my life, but I met him at Giorgio's. Bill, incidentally, had come from Detroit, I think like 2 months earlier, and essentially came from Detroit and sort of went straight into living at Gomelsky's. So he was living at the zoo house. I opened the door and just sort of artistically shocked, because I opened the door into the ground floor of the zoo house, and it's John Zorn performing one of his game pieces, or rehearsing, I should say. And this was like in the afternoon, and that was a real like mind blower for me, because I didn't really know anything about avant-garde music. I hadn't really been exposed to that. I was a Yes fan, and I knew about the Sex Pistols, and I wrote graffiti, and that's as far as it went. So that was a huge introduction, and that's at Giorgio's, and then went up to meet Bill at Giorgio's. Soon after, and it's actually like 3 blocks from here, I think, in 1978, that was really where I kind of came into this life, really, that I've lived since then. Giorgio did this, I guess it's this 12-hour manifestival. It's 12 hours, I think. It was a long thing, and it was like 2 blocks over, right here on 2nd Avenue, in like 13th Street. So yeah, 2 blocks from here. And yeah, that was more mind-blowing for me. And hopefully I've carried the torch in some way in my support for music, 35 years henceforth. But yeah, that was mind-blowing for me. That was, Fred Frith, Henry Cow, Gong, also the downtown bands, that's what we called them then, before we used words like no wave. And Giorgio even said, the downtown bands. I'm like, what are the downtown bands? He goes, well, you'll see. Actually, the reason this is important is not just that I went it wasn't just that I went as a audience member. I actually, yes, I did go as an audience member, but something happened at this 12-hour manifestival, and I sort of became a de facto stage manager, is pretty much what happened. And I think Giorgio mentioned, the guy's screwing up, because they really did have a stage manager. He's screwing up, it's not going well. And I was, because I took theater in high school, and I was like, well, maybe I can do it. And Giorgio said, yes, do it. And so I did it. I realized actually it was not that difficult. You just have to figure out what everyone needs and talk to people, and then it's done. And I had the energy at 17 years of age to pull through the 12 hours. But that was also musically, that was musically a further introduction, even beyond Zorn's game piece. It was, Glenn Branca had Theoretical Girls. That was the first time I saw that. I think I pretty much from that, I was just baffled and in admiration of Fred Frith with his prepared guitar. And so that was, and I was a bit of a guitar hero fetishist. So if you went even further than Jimi Hendrix, that was really something for me, and definitely Fred Frith did. And yeah, I guess I might as well continue with this little stories, because then fast forward 4 months or something, and then Giorgio put together this 1979 Gong tour with, in fact, was it Yachko Sefer from Magma on that one? It was David Allen's Gong. There was like 2 tours. There was one further tour a year later in Europe, which definitely had Yachko Sefer from Magma on it. But it was one of these things. It was for me, it was a bit of a dream, because, I, of course, wanted to live that dream of the merry pranksters and the, electric acid Kool-Aid test. And so here I am with a refurbished school bus that we took on the tour, which somehow I guess was organized by Giorgio. The tour was his baby. It was a month-long tour. I remember the bus was, because it had to be sort of built with loft beds and stuff, and I remember it was built in the South Bronx, which no one ever went to. But so there we are going to the South Bronx, and I'm like, oh my God, it looks like Chechnya or something now, or, So it was pretty much a war zone. It was just debris, and there was like a little place where people kind of lived. And I remember like Tibetan prayer flags in the South Bronx just wavering in the wind, and there was a school bus that people were building. Anyway, we took that bus across the country, and with David Allen, who was dressed like an elf, who also is no longer with us. You know, he would wear like a green hat like this with a star on it. And so, you know, as a teenager, I'm like, this is so cool. And with like feet with like curly cues on it and stuff. And he was like 7 feet, and we were getting in trouble with the police. And so we went across the country, and Giorgio was there some of the time, and occasionally he would fly in. And he would, one thing, if you ever can catch something, is he would do these, if he was there, because he would like fly into like, you know, Iowa or something. And then he would like start with like a speech and storytelling, just as I am now actually. And it usually ended with something like, it actually always ended, I think, with the same thing, which is a quote from somewhere of, when the music changes, beware, because the city walls are starting to crumble. That's a quote from somewhere. He would always end with that. And I remember at the time, I was, I guess, 18 then. I was like, wow, yeah, that makes sense. I'd like to believe that. I wonder if it's true. And I thought if that were to be true, it might be true with what was kind of happening around us at the time. And, you know, looking back, a lot of talk about this sort of golden era of New York City in 78, 79. I mean, definitely there's aspects of it that were facilitated by Giorgio. I mean, there was a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. A lot was happening, but a lot happened on 24th Street. And definitely a lot of us youngin', you know, we needed a place. And again, another important, highlights the importance of places and space and real estate and it being near other things. But anyway, on 24th Street, that definitely happened. So yeah, I owe Giorgio, and I'm glad to be able to represent for maybe not just me, but a whole bunch of us, 1978, the young crew. Glad to see everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have Gira playing her flute. And that will be followed actually by some videos that I tentatively edited together this morning for Beth, even though there's a lot of the stories that you've been hearing today that you're going to see on the video. That's good. No.
Hi, I'm Jera. I'm going to be really brief, but I'm going to play a song in honor of Giorgio up there. And I'm going to play Zuni Sunrise, because that's a song that the community in Zuni always greets the sun in the morning. It brings together people. People come to see the light. And I think Giorgio was a light. I met Giorgio after a Clash concert at the Palladium as a producer of one of my favorite albums, Street Noise. I absolutely loved Julie Driscoll, Brian Auger and the Trinity, and numerous bands. But I remember arguing and listening to Giorgio. I remember Giorgio going to Kiev and going over to Allen Ginsberg and giving him a hard time that he wasn't, you know, what happened to him. And I thought, who is this man? But I'm so glad to see people I haven't seen in a while. But I came up here to say something because the night before Giorgio died, I went to an industry party and they were talking about all these things of how you could do your music and this and make money and blah, blah, blah. And the people who talked had a portfolio of like maybe 20 people. One of them was Taylor Swift. You know, there were all these stars that all of us independents are sitting there going, what? What? What about us? What's going on? The studios are closing, the places to play are closing. Where is there room for the artist? And I went to the bathroom and this guy, I said, so should we kill ourselves now? And he started laughing. So I came home and I heard Giorgio died and I just cried. I cried myself to sleep because January was a heavy month for losses in the music industry and art, you know, just art, our lives. And it was around 4 in the morning and I had a visitation. This happens once in a while. I don't particularly feel comfortable with them, but I pay attention when they happen. And it was Giorgio, and he said to me, you must not stop playing. You must not stop playing your music. And it was like, oh, really? And he's like, yes, your music is your art. Your art is beautiful. And he said, these motherfucking pigs, they want to take out your heart, your soul, strip it and leave it in pieces on the floor. He said, you must not let them do that. He said, you must play, you must do your art. Your art is beautiful, your art is divine. And it's not like Giorgio would say art is divine, but he had this kind of little smile on his face and glow in his eyes. Then he just went. So I really felt like that message was for everybody here, for all of us to continue with our art. So I'm going to give a song, because this is going to, I always tried to call Giorgio on his birthday. His birthday would be tomorrow, so this is kind of for, yeah? That's on. And because it's Giorgio. We have to make it big. And beautiful.
And now we have some video made by Beth on Giorgio's 70th birthday. And I briefly edited it together, so there's a lot of similar stories you might hear, but enjoy.
I remember there was like Big Chief was the doorman of Max's. Do you remember Big Chief? Wonderful. So I'm walking up the steps, and just in front of me, he said, look, I'm trying to get into the thing. Big Chief says, no, you're like underage, no, I can't get in, can't get in. And I felt so sorry for this, for people. I said, because, they should have age limits or limitations on listening to music. So I said to Big Chief, he's with me, Lennon is with me. So Big Chief had me, and that was Jesse.
When we're not playing music, we like to get fucked up and listen to music and hang out with other people that like music, and Giorgio was always so generous and cool. And then we started doing Ringo regularly, and he started going, Jesse, it's fucking too loud. You gotta change this thing. I'm like, people are having fun, like in Main Street. The girls like the music loud. You gotta turn it down, you gotta fucking people talk. So he starts getting this new thing that said, you gotta talk, let people have a conversation. I'm like, people want to get fucked up and dance and have fun, they don't want to talk. So he finally would come downstairs about 5 a.m. and we'd had a few drinks and I had a few drinks, and that's when it would be late and everyone would be leaving and we'd have some of our most intimate conversations. This is what I call the omelet Giorgio. He would be my best friend. Jesse, let's get together, not the same person, shit, let's go tomorrow and have an omelet. Let's get up at like 1 o'clock and have an omelet and like talk about the future. He was always very political, which was cool because a lot of people into rock are now into politics, and he was always really like ready to question everything. I'd always figure if I call him the next day, he's gonna be hungover and nasty Giorgio again. Like, what are you calling me? One time I even called him about the omelet. He was like, what are you calling me? 12 in the morning. So we never had an omelet, but we had a lot of great 5 a.m. Nights talking about the omelet and everything else, and it would go on.
I think everybody's got a story about Giorgio. Should take the opportunity tonight and tell them. Listening to Jesse, since I remember we first met Giorgio in the Tramps, I think. We used to drink together a lot. And the part that Jesse was mentioning about, Giorgio never really talks about the past, like, the Rolling Stones, the Yardbirds. You really have to draw him out and be specific, because he'd rather talk about Magma, and you're going, who? And after 25 years of talking about Magma, they actually came to New York to finally play it. And it's about the weirdest band you'll ever see, but brilliant at what they do, which is a very unique little niche there. But Giorgio loves people with that little, unique spot, and he's always supporting bands. And I tell people, like, when the audience starts to know the songs that the band's playing, and the band starts to get fans, Giorgio's done with them. It's like, okay, you're on your own now, But when they're learning, when they're starting, when they're trying, he's the most supportive and helpful person around. And New York would be very different, the bands would be very different without Giorgio.
Kid, I used to think, Giorgio, who's this guy? He says he produced the Yardbirds and worked with the Stones, and I don't know, he smokes and drinks and talks, I don't know if he's for the shit. And then I'd start to read the books, the book on Zeppelin, and there's Giorgio's name. The book on the Stones and Bill Wyman, I guess this guy's real, he just doesn't have an ego, he doesn't care. But one night I'm at my girlfriend's house watching cable and there's a biography on Mick Jagger. And Giorgio comes on. I think he's actually sitting in front of one of our amps. You see Degeneration sticker. And he goes off. He goes, the Stones, Mick Jagger, the guy who never gonna act like bourgeois nincompoops and he was standing embassies like politicians. I never would have supported them in the first place. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, wow. He doesn't need to kiss ass. He doesn't give a shit. He says how he feels. And that's why I'm here tonight. I love you, Giorgio, and thanks for all the support. Happy 70th birthday. You've been great for New York and the world.
Well, I've enjoyed Giorgio's stories about the early days of the Yardbirds so many times, and I've even repeated them, as a matter of fact. But I had a phone call the other day from somebody who wanted to wish Giorgio a very special birthday. So I'd like you to please accept this gift.
What are you going to read?
No, you're going to open it. Come on. We will.
Oh,
really late, like 3 or 4 in the morning, and we had a car, and we're driving down 2nd Avenue or something like that, and we look to our right, and sure enough, who's riding his bike but Giorgio? He's just pedaling along. It was the funniest thing. It was just like riding the same speed, like, oh my God, that's Giorgio. I mean, we were completely drunk, and no matter what state of mind he's always riding his bike around town. It was like a signature thing. It was really funny.
I have one funny story about Giorgio. It's when he got his ski machine years ago. He ordered this thing in the mail because he thought he had to get in shape. And I assembled it for him in his kitchen. And it was a very cheap, junky, cross-country ski machine made of plastic. And so, and Giorgio's sitting there watching me assemble it. He has his whiskey at the table and he's smoking a cigarette. And so after about a half hour, I got the thing all together, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to try it out." So he puts a cigarette in his mouth. He's on this junky ski machine which hardly moves, but moves a little enough. And that's it. I thought that was a good summation. But this is a man I've known for a long time, and he's a marvel to me because he's got such an illustrious past. And he's the humblest person I've ever met. Even when he talks about it, and you have to pump him and get him to talk, and he'll talk for a while. But there's never an ego in it. He's pure. To me, he's one of the only examples of someone who's just really pure about what he does, and he inspires me.
Yeah, we're fellow Eminem inspirators, and how many times have we gotten together with the Eminem producers at 140 East 24, West 24th Street and get together? And he's been there holding on to that and keeping that image. But the thing I'm trying to remember, sort of a personal thing, is I remember when John Sinclair came through New York. Remember John Sinclair came through? He's a beautiful guy, MC5 guy and everything. I was just talking with our friend here. And we had that wonderful afternoon. I don't know if you remember. He was in town. He came over to the house, John Sinclair, and then Ornette came down. And the three of us sat around the table, and it was something beautiful to see, man, because I guess you knew John from some time ago or something. I'm not sure. You must have known him from MC5 days or something like that. But
Sorry, you're going to excuse my editing on that, but I did it very, very quickly. Anyway, that was from Beth. Do we have David Barry at all? Some music, and then what about Charles Ballas?
Oh, he's got a radio piece, actually.
You got it here?
Sure, I got it here. My bad.
So this is rock and roll, and most people would still be embedded this time.
Giorgio will be there? Okay, hold on one second. So, this is actually a radio piece from an interview, just a snippet that his friend Charles Bass sent. And this was Giorgio talking about music and talking about Magma. This is just a 1-minute snippet of him talking about Frank Zappa, which I found kind of interesting. So, here it is.
This is WKCR with Giorgio Gomelsky. That's Gomelsky. And a quick search online will yield many, many fruitful links.
I became pretty good friends with Zappa. In fact, I liked him a lot in those days. And I also liked what he said about, people asked him, so what's good music then, Frank? So the stuff we were talking before you went on the air tonight about, how do you judge good music from bad music or relevant music from not so relevant music? Zappa said a really good thing. He says, my ears tell me, it has to be fresh to my ears. It has to have an element of freshness, you know. So I guess it's the equivalent of going out to a grocery store and seeing and buying fresh fruit as opposed to canned fruit. And then you have fresh fruit that's no good, it's rotten, it's gone. So you know what I mean. And there's a possibility of achieving some degree of good judgment with regards to whether music is relevant or not. Anyway.
So, I met Giorgio right around that time of the interview. That was in 2005, 5. And so I got to know the later Giorgio quite well in many capacities. He was, first and foremost, a very good friend. He was a mentor. He was the manager of my band. And then he became my landlord as well. So in all those capacities, one thing that went through with me and with everything was just his brutal honesty, his determination, and his passion to try to inspire people. When I first met him in 2005, my band played at his club on 24th Street, and there was a Halloween night, and we played, and my band was called Barra Libre. It was kind of like a Latin punk, funk band, and the next day, it was a great party. We're like, what is this place? Next day, we get a phone call from one of the guys that organized the party, and he's like, oh, the owner wants to see you guys. He really liked your music. He is a veteran rock and roll producer. He's got a lot of accolades to his name. I think he managed the Rolling Stones. And we're like, and I just thought this sounds like a lot of baloney. But I lived right around the corner, actually. I lived on 29th Street, so I'm like, sure. And it happened that some of my bandmates were there, so we went at around 7 p.m., went upstairs, sat down with him. First, he started talking about Thomas Paine. He had a picture of Thomas Paine up on the wall and all his ideologies and everything. Quite fascinating. He asked us where we were from. I'm from Mexico. So then he started going at length about Mexican history, and I'm like, wow, this guy knows his history. And so about the third hour, we started to wonder why we were there. The conversations were fascinating, but time was ticking. It was a Sunday night, and we were a little hungover, to tell you the truth. And that's when Giorgio offered us a little bit of whiskey. We took it, and then my brother, who plays in the band with me, he was like, okay, I gotta leave. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock. So the band started to fizzle out, and I was left there still with a question unanswered as to why we were there. Finally, around probably midnight, 1 o'clock, he gets to it and starts talking about music. Oh, I really like what I heard from you guys, but I think I can help you. And if you listen to me, I can make your music to move. He told me a story about Jeff Buckley, that how music moves people. And he told me that once Jeff Buckley was rehearsing downstairs and he started to play. And finally, when he got it, he was at it just, day and night. Finally, when he got it, George was like, I was lifted off my seat for about 3 feet, really 3 feet. And so then at the end, he starts talking more about the sort of, the fundamentals of music, which I quite understood from him, that where he was coming from. And it was fascinating really to hear that. It wasn't the technicality, it wasn't the business, it was the fundamentals, really, the heart, the civilization, as he said. He said music was supposed to be for civilization. And that made sense, but it was quite a big concept. And I remembered that time I was reading a book called Hammer of the Gods, story of Led Zeppelin, which was one of my favorite bands, followed by the Yardbirds, actually, I grew up with, and interestingly enough, in Mexico. Somebody leaked an album over there, and I was like, all right, this is great. And I remembered, and his name sort of sounded familiar when he started talking about the Yardbirds. At first I was like, he started talking about the Beatles and the Yardbirds, and how he knew the Beatles through the tour with the Yardbirds, and then the Stones and all of that. And, you gotta wonder if all these stories are true or not. And so I went home about 4 in the morning, and then I opened the book, Hammer of the Gods, and I remember that there was something like the character mentioned, a Russian character, and indeed there was a couple of pages about Giorgio Gomelsky and Jimmy Page saying that they were under the mad tutelage of Gomelsky with the Yardbirds, and his vision and everything, and that was quite impressive. From then on, he started to mentor our band, or got us a couple of gigs. We got to play at the Bowery Ballroom. He was giving us all sorts of advice. He was kind of like a Mr. Miyagi at that time, I gotta say. You know, he was like, okay, you gotta play with a back foot. All right, with a back foot, all right. But you know, what he was saying is definitely be behind the rhythm. And all sorts of advice like that he would give us. And then, of course, he gave us a place to rehearse. And first it was rent-free. Then we had to carpet the stairs. And that was teamwork, you know. That was and he would get so mad because like we would take a lot of breaks. He's like, "You Mexicans are lazy, Latinos, you're lazy." We're like, "Wait, Georgia, we gotta like take a break here, you know." And we'd be carpeting the stairs, and I had a violin player in my band. He was the more classically trained. He did not understand what the hell we were doing there. He was like, "How is this gonna get us somewhere? Carpeting stairs, you know?" And it was a blast because we had a lot of laughs actually with that. And Giorgio would come and see. He's like, "No, you didn't do it right. No, it's got to be like this and like this." And like, okay. And but it was a pleasure to help him because we knew that he was helping us as well, and he was like genuinely like giving us not only a place, but he was giving us his time, a lot of it, and that was really genuine, and I really will always appreciate that. And that's why when my band sort of split and I had no more business to rehearse in that place, I stayed there just helping Giorgio, making music. And then before I knew it, I was starting a Kickstarter campaign to kind of get the place together because there was leak after leak. We couldn't do anything. The bathrooms were totaled. So so music got me into carpentry and constructing and all this, dealing with developers and all that kind of stuff. And and I think that learned certainly a lot, and I owe a lot to that gentleman because he was truly a gentleman. He might have had his rages and everything, but he was truly a gentleman. And before we go to some music, I just want to show you a quick video on the landlord side of things that always cracked me up because when I saw this, it resonated a lot with the persona of Giorgio as the landlord. This is from a movie, Downtown 1981. Here's a classic scene with Giorgio and Basquiat.
Hey, I caught you, sneak. Come back here, man. Come back here. Where do you think you're going? I'm going up to my apartment. It's not your apartment. It's just Airbnb. It's not down, and it will never be your apartment. It's my apartment. You can't evict me. I was in the hospital. You owe me $422.60. Right. Certified check. Cash is better. You got cash? Okay, if you don't have the money, you will be out on the street tomorrow. It's over there. Wait a second. What is this thing's worth $420? I have a buyer. That's it. Get out. Out. What do you think I am? David Rockefeller, Leo Castelli or something? I want cash.
So this was actually Giorgio, many of us got to know, and we know that even the part about art, like Bobby Belfiore and a couple of others, would always like barter with art with Giorgio, and it was amazing because when we saw that, we were like, wow, yeah, we know that character quite well. But nonetheless, at the end of it, he would be really mad at you, but then he'd let you back in, and then he'd inspire you again and tell you that what he was doing was just to push you further and further, and indeed he was like the tough love guy, but he pushed you. So we're gonna do two things. First, I'm gonna play you guys a music piece in a little bit that I composed with Giorgio, and that was kind of like a meaningful one for reasons I will explain. But first, we have really the honor to have this gentleman right here, Mark Pines. He not only was Giorgio's friend since like the mid-'60s, is that right, Mark? He's been a greatly influential man in music and in tech. He was Mick Jagger's technician for quite a while, like 18 years or more so, and has worked with amazing people, and including Giorgio. So he's going to do a piece for Giorgio, Mark Pines.
Just so many memories of Giorgio, but I'm going to concentrate on a very fond memory I want to share with you, which is the last time I saw Giorgio. My phone rings, and it's Giorgio wanting me to come over. He wants to do an interview. Oh, I should mention that we spent a lot of time working on video as well as music. So Giorgio had this project, an ongoing project called the Oral History of Rock and Roll. He felt that we should all be historians, like the cavemen wrote on the wall. Our thing was oral history. He'd have shows where people would just sit and talk about rock and roll. And as part of his oral history, he called me up and he says, I want to interview you about the time when I was in London and what was going on in New York. Because at the same time that Giorgio was doing all of his magnificent work at the Crawdaddy Club and everything else, there was a scene going on in New York. We were talking about the same people, but a different scene. And I was very heavily involved in that. I was working as a music critic at Variety, and writing for Rolling Stone and Cashbox, and working with Ahmet Ertegun and Jerry Wexler as coordinator of A&R over at Atlantic. So Giorgio wanted to pick my mind about that. He invited me over, come over, and he was making his very special Russian pancakes. I think they're called Bellini. Made me a beautiful dinner from Georgia, Russia. Sat me in front of the camera and picked my brains. And we just sat and basically did our oral history of rock and roll. I told him about everything that was going on in New York at the same time. And at the end, he just had a little impish smile on his face, and he reached into his back pocket and pulled out one of these sheets of yellow lined paper that you see kids write on in kindergarten. And on it, scrawled in pencil, was a note that he had just gotten from Keith Richards. And he very impishly said, oh, look at this. And
he read it to me, and Keith is just wondering, he's saying, Giorgio, are you still on this planet? Are you still with us? What's going on? And please, let's get together. It's so good to know that you're still around and among us. And he was just very humbly proud that this was still going on in his life. That, you know, even though he calls these guys nincompoops, he was glad to have them as friends. And he told me a hysterical story. This is not really suitable for church, but I'm going to tell it anyway. It's he and Keith were, I think it was Giant Stadium. It was one of the stadiums the Stones were playing. And they're there before the show, and they've had this big dinner, and they both have to really take a dump. And they go into the locker room, and they're looking for the bathroom, but the bathroom in the locker room, just all this whole row of toilets out in the open. This big row of toilets. And he says he and Keith just looked at each other, maybe like 20 toilets in a row. And he got on one end and Keith went down the other, and they got as far away from each other as possible. And just sitting there taking a dump in Giant Stadium in the bathroom. And I could just see the image. Anyway. On that note, I'm going to get serious. This is my rite of passage, hoping that I can help Giorgio find his way. This is the 23rd Psalm. Godspeed, brother.
Thank you, Mark. And now Raoul's going to do a piece, followed by Russ Garrett, who's with the Yardbirds, who's going to say some pieces.
I'm just going to do a very short interpretation of this long piece that we used to do, so I'll keep it very short. And just to explain to you very quickly, Giorgio was fascinated with a type of Mexican Cuban music called sones, Cuban sones, and he was encouraging us to write more of that kind of stuff. So this was inspired on those sort of rhythms, was one of the ones that we did based on a Tennessee Williams play called Camino, which means the path. And evidently so, this was the one of those songs that we never actually finished. We stayed on the path. It was one of those, and so here's for Giorgio. We still haven't finished it. We're still on the path, and I'm just gonna play a piece of it. Oh, and by the way, he wanted me to yodel on this one, so I'll give it a shot.
Doesn't matter where you came from, where you put your heart and energy, you'll hear your destiny calling. Wisdom is silent while ignorance screams for your attention. That don't understand, there's no day without night, there's no black without white, there's no love with no fight. So just please understand that I am what I am. I am this, I am that, I'm a man, I am one, and I am what I am. 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 What I am. What I am. What I am. What I am, what I am, what I am, what I am.
Thank you. Now we have Russ Garrett, who's hopefully going to yodel too.
Yeah, hi, my name's Russ. I met Giorgio through my association with the modern era Yardbirds, who most of you probably don't even know are still together. But they are. When I met Giorgio, original members Chris Drea and Jim McCarty were in the band. Chris retired in 2011 due to health problems. Jim continues to carry on. But as I was rather impressed with him, because I knew the history, being somewhat of a music geek, so, you know, the stories that some of you may have had trouble believing at first, I had already known from the written word. So I was having a conversation with him right after I met him, and I referred to him as a great impresario. And he said, "Oh, no, Russ, it is you that are the impresario." So I said, "Oh, man, like, don't put me on." And then I realized that he said, "No, look what you do. You keep them on the road. You take care of them." And I realized he was sincere. I mean, the guy was so humble and generous, as has been mentioned. So I said, "All right, I'll take it." Shortly after that, I made the mistake of asking him to introduce the Yardbirds at B.B. King's here in New York. And as some of you have said, he does love to tell a story. I think he went on for about 20 or 25 minutes, and it seemed like he was giving the entire history of recorded music. Starting with that story about the GIs in Italy after the war, and continuing and continuing. We thought we were going to have to get a hook to drag him off the stage. But always a great character, a great storyteller. He had some wild ideas. I think Jim McCarty's referred to him as the Mad Russian. So Giorgio says to me, "Russ, you've got to get rid of all these old songs. No one wants to hear For Your Love anymore. No one wants to hear Shapes of Things. Get rid of them all. And all new material." So I said, "Giorgio, who would pay to see that?" But you know, it's like, there's no use having a discussion with him on these issues. So, always great to have around. And a few years ago, John came down to the City Winery where the Yardbirds were playing. And we tried to get him to have Giorgio come down, but by that time, obviously he wasn't up to it. So Jim always wanted Giorgio to be around when the Yardbirds were playing, either here in New York, and he came up to a few gigs in Connecticut when we played the casino up there. It was always a trip. I think we have a video that Jim McCarty of the Yardbirds made and sent in for today's memorial.
When Jack Beck joined the band, our first gig was at Fairfield Hall, Croydon, and we were rehearsing with Giorgio there, and I was teasing Giorgio, and Giorgio started running around trying to chase me around the grand piano, and it was a bizarre situation, trying to chase me to smack my ear or whatever. It was Jeff Beck's first gig, and he thought, "Oh my God, what have I got into here? This is really funny."
We now have Rebecca Cherry's going to come up and play a piece that I think she put together with Dave Soldier, but I'm not sure. But we've got that, and then we have a couple of letters, and then Gary Lucas will perform.
Laughing. How many people does it take to get a music stand together? Hi, I'm Rebecca Cherry. Just quickly, I met Giorgio through Dave Soldier, and I just have a lot of really wonderful memories of hanging out with him and playing in his space, and with the Spinozas especially. And it was thanks to him that we had that group with Dave, and I'm really glad that I got to perform this piece today that Dave wrote for me in honor of Giorgio, and it's called For Gigi, and it has a lot of G's.
Just because it is an open house, if there's anyone else who wanted to say anything before we want to start winding up, then you're more than welcome to. Anyone else? That's fine. But before Gary Lucas comes on, I just wanted to read a couple of pieces. I was sent on a lot of different pieces from all over the world, which is a shame I'm not going to be able to read them all because well, unless you want to know, well, I'll read them to you all afterwards, if that's what you'd like. But I did get a piece from Peter Moody, who was one of Giorgio's babies back in the early 60s. But I got in contact with him a few years ago, and he had some great memories. But just to read what he wrote, and that is, Giorgio to many was the founder of the UK rhythm and blues scene that grew out of 1963 into a big year of 1964. Giorgio gave us so much inspiration with his spirit of the music and gave us so much more of his time. He certainly made it for some within the music business who took their musical talent on a journey of fame. Most of us found that the passion and love of rhythm and blues stayed with us, thus dwindling out of any chance of that musical fame that would follow, which really was not what we were looking for. That time and its life was something most of us wanted to stay that way forever. Giorgio knew and he loved music, and he loved working with us. And by 1966, most of us had left playing rhythm and blues, but cemented the music inside us forever, and that would never leave. Ever since then, I know, like many, we'll always remember Giorgio as the big man with the big heart. And my short time with him, like others I know, will never fade as part of my life. It was a big part, and we knew at the time that Giorgio in 1964 had shaped so much into our lives and our future, not just within the music, but in real life. Experience from a great man who really loved us all. My babies, as he would like to call us. So could I call up Gary Lucas to play us out? And then afterwards, everyone would like to come across the road to Pangaea, where we have some more music. We'll have microphones there if anyone would like to add to anything. So an afternoon of reflection and beer. Beer from the bear of the man. And so thank you, Gary.
Well, I'm just wanted to say I'm honored to be here with all of you to honor one of the greatest guys I knew, Giorgio, and I first was a big fan of his productions. We loved the Yardbirds and Julie Driscoll. He produced a band called Blossom Toes too. I don't know if they mentioned it earlier. I used to play it on my radio show in college, and just great. Collect all the Marmalade records. And I finally met him, Captain Beefheart, who I worked with for 5 years. Don Van Vliet did a show the night after John Lennon was shot at the Mud Club at 5 in the morning. And Giorgio was there, and I met him out on the street with Janice DeLugoff. I don't know if she's here. And Tom Fear. Anyway, I had a gig at CBGB's about '88 when I was playing out in New York, just starting. And I went into a piece, Hard Workin' Fucked Over Man is the title, and it was based on I'm a Man lick. And this figure at the side of the stage went, yeah! You know, when he heard it. And when I got off stage, he introduced himself, and we hit it off and had a great friendship over many years. I really, really love and miss the guy. I rehearsed Gods and Monsters when I first got that group together in '89 in his rehearsal space, and he said, I have to film this band. So I remember picking him up in the van to go out to Prospect Park to play at Welcome Back to Brooklyn Festival. We got all the way out there, and he said, damn, I forgot my camera. So he jumped in a cab and disappeared. I thought we were going to see him at all, but about 30 seconds before we went on stage, a taxi pulled up in front of the stage. He jumped out, got his camera on a tripod, and he filmed the whole thing. Many years later, he said, I have the tapes, and as a gift to you, I've baked them because the oxide is flaking off these 2-inch tapes. And I've transferred it digitally, and that's up on YouTube if you want to see it. Anyway, I'm so sad that he's gone, and that's for Giorgio.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. As John mentioned, we're going to go across the street to Pangea for whoever wants to bite. Just as we leave, I'm just going to play a quick piece that Giorgio and Gary will probably know about this. Captain Beefheart, of course, and Giorgio always wanted us to play this song called Tropical Hot Dog Night. Since my band was Latin, he's like, oh, you guys should play a Tropical Hot Dog Night. And on that note, one very last thing I want to share. I kind of debated whether to share this or not, but it was meaningful. I saw Giorgio a couple of hours before he left us, and I visited him, going on and off at the hospital. And that time, when I saw him, I knew that was probably I wasn't going to see him again, and you know, he was not really being able to speak much, just with nod his head, and had to communicate with him just via some sounds, and I didn't know what to do. I started playing some Yardbirds songs from my phone, and he would nod his head, and then he'll be like, and I could just hear him say, "Take that off!" You know. Okay, the next one. Take that off! You know, I could just hear that, and then I remembered back to the whole like Camino thing and thing, and I was like, all right, because I used to call him as well the captain, so I put La Bamba, and he started nodding his head, and I said goodbye, and unfortunately, you know, a few hours later, I got a phone call from Ed, and told me that he had gone to a better place, so. Thank you, Giorgio, for everything you did for everybody.
So we'll see you all at Pangaea across the road. Thank you for coming.